On the rocky edge of Ghana's coastline, where the Atlantic Ocean meets the land with an unforgiving crash, stands a castle. Its whitewashed walls gleam under the African sun, a deceptive mask over the horrors embedded in its stones. It was not built by the British, nor the Dutch, nor even the Swedes who first claimed this plot of land. No, the story of this castle is one of shifting power, broken alliances, and human suffering. Generations of Africans were marched through the castle's dark tunnels, forced through the door of no return, and onto the ships bound for the Americas. For them, return was impossible. But the story of this castle is not just one of tragedy. Its story is one of shifting power, betrayal, and suffering. A story etched into the walls by those who refuse to be forgotten. This is Wars of Power, Shores of Pain, Ghana's forts and castles reimagined by a Ghanaian filmmaker. Today, we unravel the haunting legacy of Cape Coast Castle, which became one of the largest slave-holding sites on the West African coast, a fortress of no return. The story of Cape Coast Castle began not as a fortress, but as a trading post. The Portuguese arrived in 1555, seeking gold and ivory. Soon, human lives became their most valuable commodity. But their hold on the coast was short-lived. The Dutch became next, expanding their claim before yet another power seized control. In 1653, the Swedes seized the settlement and constructed a wooden fortress. They named it Carolsborg after King Charles X of Sweden. But the Swedes would not hold it for long. In 1664, the British Royal African Company attacked the fort and seized control. Under British rule, the fort was rebuilt with stone, reinforced into a massive fortress capable of withstanding cannon fire. It was renamed Cape Coast Castle. Cape Coast Castle soon became a key hub in the transatlantic slave trade. Ships from Europe arrived laden with cloth, alcohol, and firearms. Each of these items a price tag on a human life. African traders from the interior brought captives to the castle in exchange for these goods.
This is where they held them, hundreds of men and women, cramped together in separate dungeons and in complete darkness.
I stand in the male dungeon. The air is thick, humid. The walls rough to the touch. The floor beneath my feet feels uneven, jagged in places.
The floors of these dungeons are not just stone. Beneath your feet lies a mixture of human waste, blood, and sweat, compacted over centuries.
I lower my gaze. My feet press against the centuries of suffering. My stomach tightens. My breath quickens.
Many never reached the ships. Disease, starvation, and despair claimed them first. Their bodies remained but their stories faded into the damp stone.
So the floor beneath me is not just dirt and stone. It's the residue of human life mixed with death. By the late 17th century, Cape Coast Castle was the British administrative center on the Gold Coast. Governors and high-ranking officers lived in the comfort in the upper chambers, directly above the dungeons. Banquets were held above the cries of the enslaved. British officers drank wine and toasted their prophets, even as human lives suffered beneath their feet. Cape Coast Castle became one of the most active centers of the transatlantic slave trade. Ships arrived from Bristol and Liverpool, loaded with manufactured goods. They left carrying African men, women, and children, bound for the Americas. Within these very walls, the British built the first Anglican church in West Africa. Above, hymns of salvation echoed. Below, cries of the condemned went unheard.
As you can see, this is a sealed entrance. The soldiers and guards used to come in here to select them. Women in this dungeon were not just imprisoned, they were prey.
The contrast is jarring. Worship and violation, faith and despair, all within the same walls. Cape Coast Castle stood through the abolition of the slave trade, the rise and fall of the British Empire, and the fight for Ghana's independence. In 1877, the British moved the administrative capital to the Christiansborg Castle in Accra. But Cape Coast Castle remained a powerful symbol of colonial authority. In 1957, Ghana became the first African nation to reclaim its independence. Cape Coast Castle stood not as a monument to British power, but as a reminder of what had been taken. Today, Cape Coast Castle is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, preserved not to glorify its history, but to confront it. Visitors walk through the dungeons, touch the rough stone walls, and stand before the door of no return, and then walk through it. But Cape Coast Castle is more than a museum. It is a sacred site, a reminder of the resilience of those who passed through its gates and the strength of those who survived. The castle's walls cannot speak, but the echoes remain. Cape Coast Castle is more than a place of memory. It is a scar upon history, an open wound. But from suffering came survival. The descendants of those who walked through the door of no return still walk among us today. Not as ghosts, but as living proof of resilience. It is also a symbol of survival. The descendants of those who passed through the door of no return live on, not only in Ghana, but across the diaspora. From the depths of suffering came strength. Next time, join me to the fort in a town called Abanze. Where oral history tells us of an African woman who worked as a cook at the Fort Amsterdam. She successfully poisoned the guards on duty, which almost led to their deaths. This is Walls of Power, Shores of Pain, Ghana's forts and castles reimagined by the Ghanaian filmmaker. Written and narrated by me, Kwaku Sikahene. Tour guide's voice was played by Wusua. This series was fact-checked in consultation with Samalakwa of Ghana Museums and Monuments Board. Sound score and design by 801 Studios.